and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Jim Gurley. And we always talk about things, general life things around the flywheel, our foundational flywheel of life, where the 5 areas, and Jim, I'll let you go into that a little bit when I pass the mic back to you. But we were talking a little bit before the recording, and a couple stories came up, and what we found ourselves talking about, among many other things, was the notion of mentorship. And because it's such a big topic, we're not going to talk about it comprehensively. We're going to pick a couple of nuggets, kind of subtopics inside mentorship. And Jim, maybe you want to tell that story. Maybe you want to lead with something else, but I'll pass the mic over to you, and let's get going.
All right. Yeah, Mark, again, I appreciate you sharing the framework that we talk about. Our tagline, again, is the imperfection is the perfection, right? I think it's going to be very relevant to the topic today of well, we said it's the main category, I guess, is mentorship. Everything's mentorship, but it's the difference between being nice and kind. And we both have some stories, recent stories that display that. And at least, as time goes on and you realize the people that have had the greatest impact on you, those are the people that you trusted their advice, but also they maybe told you some things you didn't want to hear because, and I do think some people are thin-skinned. Once they hear something negative, they run away because they try to avoid the criticism. But if you really care about somebody, you won't be nice, you'll be kind. And being kind is telling them in advance that what is going on is going to affect the relationship, long term. And so I've got a couple stories, and I'd like to hear some of yours. I know that's part of what you're doing right now is helping companies work through some of these things, because these are skills maybe that we just take for granted at this stage in our life, or just the way we were raised. But I don't think they're as common as they once were, and there's many reasons for that. But maybe the physical interaction, right, of being around somebody and being held accountable. You've heard me say this so many times. 90% of life is just showing up. Show up on time, show up prepared, and show up all the time, and you're at a whole other level. And I couldn't, but I think that's more important than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, all valid points. I think that the way we communicate now, and I told you this before about my kids, it's like, if they text me something, I'll text them back once. And if they text me again, I'll pick up the phone and call them, because and that whole Harvard study everybody's talking about lately, I think, is about 80 years of data now about what the most important thing is for men in their happiness. It's the number and depths of their social relationships, their friendships, the people that they love and trust. And I think that society as a whole, I was saying this before we hit record, it just seems, and maybe it's the recent debate, maybe it's just overall the political noise, the division, but it's like people are confused about personal accountability, and they're confused about compassion. To your point about the nice and kind thing, I mean, it's like giving people free shit without any expectation of anything in return is bad for people. We find that out when we're children, and then, the thing to do when you fuck something up is not to immediately seek to blame someone or something else. That's not the way the world works,
But think about it. Some of this could have something to do with, it's easy to say things, say online in text, than it is to say something to somebody's face.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I do think that part of this is part of the culture of interacting and sharing thoughts with people you don't even know. You could say that you would never say that in their face. So when I talk about our background, remember, we grew up in a time when there was no way to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's
like there is now.
There's plenty of people online that are tough as hell over the social media waves, and if they said that to your face, you'd probably punch them. You know. So there's
that's the Mike Tyson quote, right? Everything looks easy till you get punched in the face.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
everybody's something until you get punched in the face. Yeah,
yeah. It's
everybody's a
it's
tough
it's
guy.
it's
Yeah,
true.
tell me. I was very interested in the story that you told that kind of brought us to this topic. Do you mind jumping back into that?
Yeah, it's a little personal, but again, I think I think it's worth sharing. And again, as you know, I've been involved with my let's say former high school for the last over 15 years now. Started off uh, as just an event, a golf tournament to raise funds for my former high school. At the time, um, again, it was 15 years ago. So I reached out to some very good friends. That time, one was a professional baseball manager. The other one was a professional um, head coach for the NFL, and they were great. They all came in on it, and we raised I think close to $100,000, and redid a weight room, and then that eventually evolved into getting involved somewhat in the politics. And I helped the superintendent uh, bring a bond initiative to the ballot, and that passed a $240 million bond initiative, which rebuilt the sports facilities or the football fields basically for all three high schools. So but then over time, I realized that what what everybody needs, and that is the coach needs a coach,
Mhm.
because you realize what a sacrifice those coaches make, and those teachers, right? They're given a lot of their time with some very difficult circumstances and often a lot no support. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I kind of shifted as I did some big events, and there's a lot of, let's just say, publicity at the time, especially with the celebrities at the time that were involved in it. But I shifted more towards mentoring the players themselves, particularly the seniors, getting them
Mhm.
ready, what I refer to as the last whistle, which is, you know, when football season ends in November,
Mhm.
and the last bell when school ends in June. And that's when their life changes. Right? You've heard me
Mhm.
say this before. We prepare them for capitalism. We prepare them for socialism. We reach them to capitalism and wonder why it, they're confused.
Yeah.
So it's just having those conversations to get them ready for life, and has very little to do with football. But football is a great place to learn about how life works, right? Showing up, having teammates, knowing there's a scoreboard at the end of the and
Mhm.
there's only so much time and so much um, you can do in this, and when you're done, you will be judged by the scoreboard, and that a lot of times is life. So as a result, it's been a great experience. I don't talk about it as much anymore publicly. I think I went kind of under the radar just because I prefer to do it that way.
Mhm.
But the last in recent years, it's become very rewarding to see that first class that when we started this for came back, and now that like there's at least five or six uh, that are actually on the coaching staff right now, and three in the school, one a head coach.
That's awesome, Dad. Yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta stop you for a second and say the way that you speak about raising 240 million and rebuilding all three high schools is like, yeah, whatever, no big deal. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You're
so,
right. At the time, you don't realize the impact that has
oh
because,
man,
and this is your quote. I'll take this quote from you. Everything's politics, right? I was in politics. I just didn't realize it.
yeah,
But I also
yeah.
realized how the importance of having a relationship with the superintendent, having the votes of the board members, that takes time. That takes a lot of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I look back now, I was actually asked to speak at the ribbon cutting of that ceremony when that happened. But I look back now, and it's been at least 5 years. And wow, you talk about having an impact on a community, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
kids play right now, and I say one of the premier facilities in the Bay or in California. It's on a kind of a dome. You can see the San Francisco Bay from the home side. Seats. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it should be about, right? Anybody in this country, I believe, you work hard enough, uh, sh- couldn't achieve anything, but you
But
have to be
yeah,
able to compete. And
yeah. Yeah, the mentorship thing is I think about it in so many different ways, but I think maybe most importantly, and you did this with the young man that we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
you held him accountable, and the kind of nice thing is, being nice to people is okay, whatever. Of course, you want a component of your behavior to be nice,
Mhm.
but that doesn't take the place of being kind. And being
Mhm.
kind or compassionate means holding people accountable to a particular set of standards, and
Mhm.
showing up for things on time and prepared is one of those standards if you want to succeed in life. And I think that in my experience, because of what I've done for a living, because of who I am, because of my parents, the way I was raised, I try to go throughout the day and think to myself, if you're going to react or act on behalf of someone or in the presence of someone, or you have the opportunity to respond or say something to someone, I think to be really responsible, you have to be able to tell yourself, and I have to remind myself all the time, be kind
Mhm.
and be aware that you
Mhm.
could change this person's life
Mhm.
with a word or a gesture. And
Mhm.
I don't think that's an over exaggeration.
Mhm. No, it's not. It applies to everybody, right? It applies to the people's closest to you as well. Having those conversations instead of them being confrontational, in the moment, you have those conversations so you can, what I often refer to is, you take those big boulders and you chop them up into the sand, and
Hmm.
and then they don't they don't disrupt. They're not in the way of the little things. And I think it's something, uh, I don't want to get too much into. Well, it is a men's club, right? It's but I do think it's a man's responsibility. I really believe, as a man, our job is to step in at a certain point and say, hey, let's just stop the crazy stuff right now. Let's stop the crazy talk.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all the time, but when it gets unhealthy, or there's a behavior, or there's a pattern, if you really care about your family, you're going to have to be the bad guy, and you're going to have to want to step in. And again, I don't want to get too personal with your situation, but I think that's exactly what you did for your children in your first marriage, right? It said,
Yeah. I was
the,
just thinking about, as you're talking, I'm thinking about few conversations I've had with my kids, mostly my girls. I told you before, they came back from college, liberal
yeah,
arts college, with a liberalism flavor that they didn't leave with. And I encourage them to get out there, and they don't
yeah,
have to agree with me about everything. They don't have to believe me about everything. But I never once said to them, okay, I'm gonna quiet the noise by appeasing you and not disagreeing with you about that. No, I'm gonna
yeah.
I'm going to be kind to you by
Hmm.
telling you I don't agree with you. Let's
Hmm.
discuss it.
And
And
let's
maybe
learn from each other.
maybe both of us can learn something from this. And you know what happens, Jim? And you know this. Instead of them being mad at me, they have a heightened level of respect for me, because when you're
Mhm.
kind to people, you are literally,
Mhm.
supporting the
Yeah,
notion that you're a better person than if you weren't.
yeah,
So respect
yeah.
is gleaned from saying no. No is maybe one of the most important words a parent can use for at least 16 years.
Mhm. It does remind me of a quote I saw recently about, I'd rather be feared than liked. And that doesn't mean feared as you're going to hurt somebody,
Hmm.
but feared as in fear of losing something, or fear of being accountable. Fear has, many different meanings, right? But
Yeah.
but I
Well.
but I like it. I think,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. No, I
uh,
like it too. And you know where that comes from? I probably
no, I don't.
before it's the Bible, man. You're supposed to fear the Lord. You're supposed to fear God.
Yes,
And
of
then
course. Yeah.
you're supposed to explain the context of that, because it's not the fear that
Mhm.
he's going to hurt you. It's the fear that he's responsible for everything.
Mm,
So you better behave even when no one else is looking, because he's looking.
yeah.
So that's another perfect example of words mean things.
Yeah.
Fear is not necessarily bad. Fear is
Yeah.
potentially something you can
Yeah,
use
it's
to hold
it's
people
another
accountable.
perfect example too. Again, when we had this, let's just say, common reference document, the Bible, people were maybe a little more on the same page. And again, as you know, I'm I believe in spirituality. I'm not a Catholic in practice. I'm baptized. I've grown up in a Catholic so-called family, but I appreciate you bringing that the source to that, because I do think that is a blueprint to life. There are a lot of nuggets in there that we can learn by, right?
I
That
can't
we
remember.
maybe
Yeah.
lost or away.
Yeah, I
So
can't remember who said it, but I heard it recently. I think probably Jordan Peterson, because he says most of the cool things that I remember, at least lately. If you didn't believe in God at all, but you took the 10 commandments
yeah,
and you just lived your life like by them,
yeah,
you'd lead a good life, you
yeah,
know? And
yeah.
so
And you'd have good relationships, and you have people that care about you. All those things, you would benefit from all of those things that you learned in the
100%.
10 Commandments. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
100%. But
Yeah.
and back to the mentorship thing. I think these folks that I'm teaching right now, coaching right now at this particular client of mine, there's a lot of them that are in the late 20s, early 30s. A
Hmm.
couple of them are a little older than that. But one of the things that's becoming clear to me is that in order to teach them about business in whatever leadership, whatever, you really have to get into their personal lives to some extent. And I did this as a recruiter too. I to build a true relationship, to build trust and credibility. I just don't see how you can do that
Hmm.
without getting into someone's business, probably more so than most people would be comfortable doing. And I was always comfortable with it, but it's amazing to me how many of these young people, and they're good people, generally speaking, they're nice, they're smart, they're kind, they're articulate, they listen, they're respectful. Um, they're not lost, but there's so much stuff they don't know.
Yeah.
And
And there's
there's
so much coming at them. In fairness,
yes.
Mark, they have so much more information coming at them than we did,
Hmm.
right? But between all the different social channels, the media, there's so much information
Yep.
every day that they're asked to consume and then be halfway normal. It's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, there's a lot of things, and another. If I were to be mentoring a young person, one of the things that I certainly would begin with is, there's there's um there's a whole lot of stuff out there, like to your point, and you can't just assume you're being told what's true or even what's false. If you're interested in a particular topic, and this is to every young person or old person in the world, I think you got number one. This is what I do. I have to care about it because there's too many things to care about everything, right? And I have to hear it with at least a healthy sense of skepticism, like, okay, and it has to make sense to me. But even then, if I want to really be able to talk about it and defend a particular position, I got a lot of work to do before I even open my mouth, right?
yeah,
I have to seek out more information. And that's what young people, because of their circumstances right now, social media, and to your point, the noise, I think we just grab onto things and accept them as true or accept them as false because we heard a few people from a particular viewpoint say something, and I think that's lazy. It's like not
yeah,
showing up, you know.
yeah, yeah. I'll because I know you want me to share the story, so I'll share the story. But before that, and I just want to just pick up where you left off about this without making this whole episode about the last week's debate between the former president and the current president. If again, without getting into the personalities, but it was terrible. It was
Yeah.
terrible, and there's lies on both sides, and if that's the top, do you blame him for being confused? How can
Yeah.
you believe that was a sad moment as Americans, and it does start from the top. Everything does, right? And it
Hmm.
trickles down. So hopefully we'll come out of this. But if we're looking for our leaders, if that's our leaders for guidance and yeah, these politicians have created this division, particularly the one in power right now,
Hmm.
uh, in order for political gain, and that's a very sad day.
Well, it's and we probably sound naive for thinking that this is like, are you surprised? The thing that I hope comes from this most of
Yeah.
all, that particular event that you just referred to, is some people that have just been, swallowing bullshit for a
Yeah.
long time will go, you know what? If I don't think they're trying to mislead me before that,
Yeah.
I now know you guys have been lying to us. And it's like, I'm not going to listen to you anymore, whoever you are. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I
Well,
hope
Mark,
that,
look at the worst part was the debate was bad itself. That speaks for itself. How about the people defending what we just saw? Like,
I know.
just ignore what you saw. It was
Yeah.
only 90 minutes. That's not true.
No.
They're outright lying for this man.
Yeah.
And
If you didn't see that for what it was, shame on you, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it explains some confusion.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
bring your young fellow into the conversation,
yeah.
because part of what you said he was he's got a lot coming at him. You know?
Yeah, again, I don't like, I don't want to refer to him as a young fellow, but because he's not that, but he's younger than us, and I think that some people are worth it, right? Some people the ROI, right? The return on investment uh, is worth it. And again, I went to his, of course, I went to his high school graduation, his college graduation. I went to his wedding. I think I went to his father's service. Yeah, yeah, I did. So I've seen him grow up. It's kind
Yeah.
of like a son, right? Same age as
Yep.
my son, but
Mhm.
but yeah, the ROI is unbelievable. You give him something and it comes back tenfold.
Yep.
So that's why when we were, he's got a lot going on, right? And I've been there, and we've all been there at that age. And when yeah, he missed a couple appointments or apologized for not getting back or something, which is fine. That's normal stuff, right? But like after the third or fourth time, I said, this is a pattern. And if I really care about this relationship, I could just say, oh, that's the way he is. He changed. But I didn't want to do that, right? For myself, for selfish reasons myself, right? So I sent him a text and said, hey, I'm noticing this is a pattern. And um, I think we should have a conversation before this affects our relationship going forward, right?
Mhm.
So I wasn't criticizing. I was just saying this is going to affect the way I look at you if
Mhm.
we don't get this tightened up a little bit. And then the result was, hey, let's get together and have a face-to-face dinner, no interruptions, not at the school, not even over the phone, because it's very hard to be in a, and then we had a great conversation. Um, and talked about a lot of what we talked about. We used the Imperfect Men's Club framework, right? The 5 areas of life and
Mhm.
how it applies, how it's all going on. And in the center is, it's all about being self-aware, but
Mhm.
also being your best self. And if you get these areas right in life and you know that they're going on, um, anything's possible. It's just, and again, he's a very, very effective communicator. He's an excellent coach. First season as head coach, he went 7-3, um, and and he's building a program. And the goal, it's a common goal, is that we can compete with any team in any area, right? Because there is a huge disparity between, to say, the teams um, in other regions of the Bay Area in terms of competitiveness and resources. So if we really want to help these kids for the rest of life, we can put them in a position where they have the confidence they can compete with anybody. Because right now they can't. They have some disadvantages. The facilities were the big ones at one time, but it's also quality coaching, quality strength and conditioning, all those things, and they're doing that.
Mhm.
And it's going to take a few years. It's a legacy program.
Mhm.
That's even his talk. So, um, but yeah, I think that's the difference between being kind and nice. I could have been nice and said, it's okay. I accept your apologies for being sorry for missing that appointment. But the other kind of a realization I had, Mark, was, as I'm getting closer to 60, I'm running out of time, right? Like, I don't have a lot of extra time to waste with people that I don't care that much about. So I'm going to be much more selective of who I spend time with. And the fact that there's no money involved, it makes it even better, right? Because remember, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm helping him build the program. And by the way, the program, we have, she's over 200 youth kids that are feeding that program now. All this has all happened in the last few years, so it's become quite an organization. Um, to bring these kids in early on, I'm talking like 10 years old and up, and then feed them into that program, so they can compete. But that is a major undertaking as far as changing culture, changing mentality, changing mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely that can I'm convinced that can happen, but remember, it started 15 years ago, right? It doesn't start the first day of practice.
Yeah, it's like there's so much mentorship gold in there, so
Yeah,
many, and the other thing that I'm hearing is you're coming at this late 50s man, life experience, wisdom, family, lots of successes, lots of failures, lots of challenges, and that you're bringing that to this younger man. You
yeah,
might not think he's young, but he's a hell of a lot younger than we are.
yeah.
And then
Yeah,
he's
he's close
bringing
to
it.
half our age. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then you guys are collectively, the ripple effect of that is getting down into the 10-year-olds.
yeah.
And the ripple effect of that is getting into those 10-year-olds' families and so
Oh,
on and so on. It's getting back into the school.
yeah,
It's this
yeah.
butterfly effect. Is the power of this stuff is incredible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you mentioning the families. I think you're right, especially if the families feel like they're part of it and they buy into it. And remember, 90% of life is showing up. If the kid just gets to practice,
Yep.
and if he's 10 years old or 11 or 12 or 13, the parents have to get him there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just that's you transfer that to anything you do in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Showing up. So yeah, and again, there's certain things that we've done. Like I think I mentioned that every year I do a team camp out. So I let them use my uh, a pretty big piece of property. So far back is a big patch of grass. So every year the team shows up and the coaches, and they spend the night and they bring their tents. And so but that's consistency, right? I haven't missed one. We even did one during COVID, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the consistencies that they can count on, look forward to every year. And there's been a few coaches, but I think that's what everybody wants, is the consistency and continuity. And that's how you make change. It was also, I've shared this, people, why do you do it? Well, it's something I really benefited from by growing up in Hayward. And I think I told you my story before, but I'm like third string third string. I was brought up to varsity my sophomore year. So, but I learned that. I learned how to compete, and I
Mm-hmm.
learned that gift of preparing, working hard, and not being holding your. There's no limits, right? And if I hadn't experienced that,
Mm-hmm.
it helped too, because my teammate was the next year or a couple years later was the MVP of the Rose Bowl, and the other one was the MVP of the Carl's World Series. So I
Yeah.
had pretty good role models, right? Or
That's
pretty good
that.
mentors.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so. I've told you my son's story before. He's
Yeah,
overcome addiction,
yeah,
and
that's great.
his mother abandoned all three of my children, just even from a relationship standpoint. So, and he was struggling for a while, but one of the things that he gets to do, because most of the time I work from home, and he works from home too. He's got a phone customer support job at one of the local universities, which is going to lead to some wonderful things. I'm watching him blossom, and one of the things that I notice is he watches me and he listens to me. He'll
Of
crack the
course.
door. He'll
Yeah,
crack the door on his bedroom when we're doing our pod. He's not here
yeah,
today, but he'll
yeah,
crack the door and he'll listen, and he'll come
yeah,
out and he'll say, "Dad, that was awesome,"
yeah,
or can I ask you about this? Can I ask you about that? But it's like I'm mentoring him passively by
yeah,
modeling, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like, and I get to see the immediate results. And maybe it's one of the reasons that I can't talk enough about how important it is. You said it before, even coaches need coaches. I mean, we
yeah,
all do. I mean, you effectively act as a coach for me when we interact, and I act as a coach for you when we interact. And it's
yeah.
I get I get coaching from other people too. My brother, my father, my friends are all, one of the things, and I bet you could say this too. One of the things about my small circle of friends, and I encourage people to have a small, real deep circle of friends, is they'll call out my bullshit faster than anybody,
Yeah.
and that's why they're friends. That's why they're true friends. But this
Yeah.
modeling thing with my son, I just had to bring it up because it makes me
Yeah.
tickles.
Yeah, you know what else, Mark, that makes me, and this is going back to the conversation we had dinner on Friday, was I had some clarity about what we're doing on the podcast, but also, and we've talked about this a little bit before, about the importance of an
Mhm.
agent that sees your abilities and talents, and has a way to position those in the marketplace, right? The business, whatever, is better than you can because you're so close to yourself.
Mhm.
And I think everybody needs an agent, whether it's a business agent, but an agent to help them position themselves as value. And that's what I've started to do with. I think we do it innately in general, but
Mhm.
I just don't think there's a better investment than having somebody that can take you and position you, even if it's
Mhm.
helping you write your LinkedIn, right? Even if it's helping you create a framework like we have or 5 areas of life, um,
Mhm.
and your
Mhm.
messaging, little things like that, that get you clear about what your intentions are, what your goals are, your short-term goals, your long-term goals are, and what is the legacy you want to leave behind when it's all done and over. And
Yeah,
I'm
you would.
speaking to specifically to men when I'm sure it applies to everybody.
Yeah, it's well, what I did for a living for a long time. I was
That's
basically,
exactly what you did, right?
yeah,
But but in the career space. Yeah.
yeah, and I think about, what was my role? My role was, you tell me everything, and I'll tell you what not to share, what to share, when to share it, how to say it, and I'll give you a bunch of other advice. But I'm going to go talk to the potential future employer of yours, and I'm going to have that
Yeah,
conversation.
you're
So,
his agent. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
so you don't have to. And
yeah,
because I know what to say and I know when to say it, but
yeah,
I need you to tell me comprehensively everything. Because if
yeah.
I ask you what you're making and you don't tell me, we're not going
No,
to have a relationship. Because when that guy asks me what you're making and I go, he wouldn't tell me,
yeah,
there's no credibility to the
yeah,
relationship. So, yeah, there's so many. I've heard, and you have, I'm sure as well, pro athletes uh, talk about their agents, and
mm,
when the relationship is intact, they talk very highly. They understand the value. They understand that they're
mm,
being protected. They
mm.
understand that they're
Yeah,
being, represented accurately and thoughtfully and in their best interests and so on. But yeah, I'm naturally, but based on my upbringing and my career, operate as an agent. But you know what that probably does to me too, Jim, and you've created some awareness around this, is it probably makes me think I don't need one as much because
yeah.
I am one, you know?
Well, I remember there's when I flew out this a few years ago now, we flew out to Orlando and we met and whiteboarded this out. That's how we came up with the framework of these areas. And and that's how they all tied in together. And we, like you said, we do that. Uh, we help each other through our weekly conversations. But I really think people ask, hey, what are you doing with the podcast, Imperfect Men's Club? Hopefully, here in the few next following weeks, we'll have a program where we can offer a session, an agency, uh, let's say service.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
exactly what that looks like, we don't know yet. Um,
We're getting
could be
there. I
some
think
kind of a
it's
course, but I do think there's a lot of value in helping the one-on-one of fleshing that out with somebody
yeah.
and
I
these
think what we
using
need
this
to
framework. Yeah,
but we need to bring the framework to it. It needs to have some kind of system and practice around it.
yeah,
But it ultimately is interactive discussion about, challenging things, difficult things, important things, whatever. But the more we talk about this and the more I talk to other people about what we're doing, and it sounds like you're experiencing the same thing, the more it feels to me like, to your point, everybody needs this, and
yeah,
sometimes the person that you need, I think they need to be kind. They need to be personally accountable. They need to show up consistently. They need to be well intentioned. But beyond that, and maybe that's asking a lot. I don't know. But
Yeah.
beyond that, all they need is wisdom. They just need to have been here for a while and seen some things, you know,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah. But
10
two,
years.
two things if we're going to wrap up, I think, and I'll lean toward you for the exact words, but um, we were both on a call or over a weekend, right? A program. And one of the words that came out is don't leave your music inside you, something about you have an
Don't,
obligation.
don't, yeah, don't die with your music inside you.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I thought. That was fantastic because it's almost like if you do, we're not helping anybody by keeping it by not helping anybody. And even though we do this maybe, as a friend or um, unsolicited for we do it, but to charge for it, I think in some ways will give it more meaning. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what the price is going to be, but I know that when you pay for something, you value it more. And
No question. No question. I mean, the reason that I was on that thing all weekend was because I paid for it, you
yeah,
know,
that's
and
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
not the reason, but one of the
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Because,
And the reason I was on it was because you paid for it. So, but I mean that because the material is good enough, but I think by not charging for it reduces the value of it. You're not really helping anybody by giving it away for free. And I
yeah.
think after 55 episodes or more that we have right now, we probably need not probably we really need to push this out and let people take advantage of this with some
Well,
one-on-one as
yeah.
their a personal agent um, experience.
Yeah, and I mean, if anybody's listening and you want to reach out and contact us and say, look, I don't want
Yeah.
to wait and see what that looks like. Let's just start talking.
Yeah.
Bring it on. You
Yep.
know, I think that the best way for us to determine exactly what people need is to ask people what they need.
Yep.
And especially asking someone what they need after they've paid you money for your opinion.
Hmm.
But I think that, you know, there's a lot of things in life to me that are counterintuitive.
Hmm.
And that's one of them, you
Yeah,
know,
it
that
is. Yeah.
free stuff is not as good as paid stuff. And, you know, nice is not the same thing as kind, you know? So it's
Mhm.
like, and
Well, what are you paying
compassion.
for? You're paying for speed and execution, right?
Yeah.
The information probably doesn't change that much. We give away pretty much everything we know every week on our episodes, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's at least 50%, if not 75% of it.
Well,
But it's that 25% of uh, to
customization. Yeah.
customization, implementation.
Yeah, customization and execution and
Yep.
accountability.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's all. Yeah, I think if I was gonna, I mean, that kind of a nice way to end things, but I would just kind of reiterate because it's so powerful. I think if you're walking around, anybody that's listening, if you're walking around today, I task you with this: the next time you're tempted to be nice to someone, remind yourself that being kind might be a better option, and see where your head goes with that.
Yeah. Good stuff, Mark.
Thanks, Jim.
Until next week.
Okay.